They call them jangmadang, the shadow lungs through which North Korea breathes when the state forgets to feed its own heart. Imagine a city morning in Chongjin. The air smells of coal dust and cold rice. Loudspeakers mounted on crooked poles recite the words of the marshal, monotone and eternal, praising the nation's self-reliance. Yet, behind the slogans, in narrow alleys hidden from the eyes of uniformed patrols, an entire parallel world stirs awake. A woman squats beside a cloth sheet spread across frozen dirt. On it, a handful of Chinese batteries, soap wrapped in foreign plastic, and a few sticks of dried fish glisten under the weak sun. She doesn't shout. She watches. She waits. Each movement around her could mean a customer or an informer. These markets began as whispers, survivors of famine. In the 1990s, when the public distribution system collapsed, people starved while the regime broadcast images of plenty. Parents boiled grass and bark. Children disappeared into the quiet of hunger. In that silence, necessity broke ideology. Women, widows of the famine, began trading anything that could be exchanged: scraps of corn, pieces of soap, second-hand clothing stolen from corpses near the border. They became the reluctant architects of capitalism in a place where capitalism was a crime. From those first illegal exchanges grew the jangmadang, North Korea's forbidden heartbeat. Walk deeper into one of these markets and you step through layers of contradiction. Officially, they don't exist. Yet every city has one. Sometimes many. The authorities fence them, register them, even collect fees from stallholders, pretending to manage disorder. The system calls this regulation. The people call it survival. A soldier guarding the entrance might confiscate your goods or accept a quiet bribe. A few yuan, a cigarette, a smile. The transaction becomes a microcosm of the entire nation. Loyalty purchased by hunger. Corruption disguised as patriotism. Inside, noise hums beneath restraint. Vendors murmur instead of shouting. Foreign goods arrive disguised: Chinese instant noodles relabeled in Korean, Japanese medicine hidden inside rice sacks. Small radios, smuggled across the Yalu River, pass from hand to trembling hand, each one a potential death sentence. A single memory card may contain South Korean dramas, pop songs, or forbidden news. A glimpse of a life without fear. The market is not just commerce, it is information. It is rebellion written in the language of trade. At first, the government tried to crush it. Soldiers raided stalls, burned contraband, arrested mothers selling rice. They called them traitors to socialism. But when even soldiers' families began to depend on those same markets, ideology bent before reality. Now the state coexists with its own enemy, feeding off the very thing it forbids. Taxes collected from the markets fund local officials, and local officials protect the traders. It is a fragile truce drawn in chalk over blood. In Pyeongseong, known as the Wall Street of North Korea, this black-gray economy has evolved into something more refined. Hidden warehouses store Chinese electronics, counterfeit cosmetics, even North Korean pharmaceuticals exported through clandestine networks. Cell phones imported illegally are resold with domestic SIM cards, their signals filtered through government towers that monitor every whisper. Here, power is measured not only in loyalty, but in access to money, to goods, to whispers from the border. Every product tells a story of risk. A truck driver smuggling rice from the south of the country must pass dozens of checkpoints. At each one he rehearses his lines: for the army, for the cooperative, for the people. Each statement both true and false. The guards know, they always know, but they too have families waiting. So the bribe becomes another silent pact, a currency stronger than the one, stronger than fear. The government prints money, the people print survival. In the early years, women dominated these underground markets. Men were trapped in state jobs, required to appear at factories that produced nothing but slogans. Women, officially unemployed, could disappear into the crowd. They became traders, smugglers, mothers, economists. They crossed rivers at night to barter for flour, learned the value of yuan and the language of silence. Over time, they built informal empires, networks spanning villages and provinces. Some grew rich enough to bribe their way into safety. Others were caught, sent to labor camps where winter lasted forever. Yet still, the markets grew. A single market scene captures the paradox. Under a faded portrait of Kim Il-sung, a child sells sweets imported from China. Next to him, an old man repairs a bicycle with parts smuggled through the border. Nearby, a police officer buys cooking oil, pretending not to recognize his neighbor selling it. Each participant acts in defiance of ideology while performing obedience. It is theater, a collective performance of survival. As years passed, the Jangmadang began shaping more than just wallets. They reshaped minds. Generations who grew up amid scarcity learned that survival comes not from the state, but from self-initiative. They saw that money moves faster than loyalty, and that truth can hide in the wrapper of a foreign snack. These subtle realizations became cracks in the wall of fear. People started to dream beyond their borders, not with slogans, but with curiosity. A woman trading rice may imagine what lies across the Yalu. A teenager watching a smuggled K-drama begins to question why streets elsewhere glow at night while his remains dark. The regime senses this slow infection. Propaganda now warns that the enemy enters through temptation. Campaigns remind citizens that foreign products carry ideological germs. Yet even cadres' children covet South Korean shampoo and Chinese smartphones. Every confiscation is followed by another deal, another shipment, another silent nod. The line between loyalty and survival fades until it is meaningless. The markets also expose the fragile hierarchy of privilege. Official rations still exist on paper, but those who thrive in the markets wield real influence. The wife of a mid-level official may invest in smuggling operations, using her husband's position as a shield. Military officers trade fuel on the side. Even border guards, sworn to prevent crossings, rent the night for a price. Corruption becomes systemic not out of greed but necessity. When the system fails to feed you, disobedience becomes virtue. At dusk, when loudspeakers fall silent, the market transforms. Vendors pack their goods into hidden compartments beneath wooden stalls. Money changes hands in darkness. Chinese yuan folded inside domestic bills, crisp and foreign. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle echoes, heading toward Xinhuiju, toward China. Each sound carries the pulse of an economy the world isn't supposed to know exists. Officially, North Korea remains a command economy. Unofficially, it runs on shadow and trust. Consider the mechanics. Goods enter mostly through the Chinese border. Some cross legally under trade agreements. Others slip through porous checkpoints, where inspectors turn their gaze for a fee. Traders along the Tumen and Yalu rivers maintain kinship links, families separated by war, but reunited by commerce. A bag of rice can cross the river 50 times before reaching its final consumer, each time growing more expensive, each time feeding another hungry household. The government pretends these flows are invisible. In truth, it relies on them. The black market keeps famine at bay, stabilizes discontent, and quietly supports the illusion of control. But the regime also harvests this shadow economy. It taxes stall space, licenses traders, and enforces loyalty payments. These fees fund local projects. Roads, propaganda centers, surveillance equipment. In a cruel twist, the underground market sustains the very apparatus that hunts it. Like a parasite that keeps its host alive, the regime knows precisely how much to bleed without killing the body. In the capital, Pyongyang, the contrast sharpens. Here, privileged elites shop in state-approved stores, stocked with imported goods available only through foreign currency. Yet even these shelves are secretly replenished by market networks. Diplomats returning from abroad smuggle in luxury liquor, cosmetics and electronics, selling them quietly to trusted clients. Behind every official storefront lies an unofficial supply chain, a web of favors and bribes connecting the elite's comfort to the peasant's peril. There is irony in abundance. When sanctions tighten, market activity intensifies. As borders close, prices rise, smuggling adapts. The state condemns capitalism, yet depends on it for stability. Without these markets, hunger would roar again, and with hunger comes rebellion. So the government chooses selective blindness, a survival strategy disguised as ideological purity. It is a nation living on its own contradictions. Imagine a trader's journey on a winter night. She walks along the frozen river, carrying a backpack of cigarettes. The ice cracks beneath her feet. Across the water, Chinese lights shimmer like forbidden stars. Each step is a calculation. How much fear equals 1 kilogram of rice? She moves silently, praying the guards have taken their bribes. Somewhere behind her, her children sleep in a dark room heated by a single coal brick. Their dreams depend on her footsteps. If she returns, they eat. If she doesn't, they vanish into statistics. These markets also carry whispers of change. Through them flow not only goods, but ideas. That wealth can exist without permission, that power can be negotiated, that truth can travel faster than fear. Some analysts call the Jiangmedang the embryo of future transformation, a slow evolution from within. For now, they remain tolerated but unacknowledged, feeding the body the mind refuses to recognize. Foreign observers who have glimpsed these markets describe them as surreal. Rows of vendors under makeshift roofs, faces hard from years of caution. Children play among sacks of grain, their laughter oddly out of place. Soldiers mingle in uniform, pretending to inspect but often buying. The rhythm feels normal until you realize every gesture hides risk. A glance too long, a word too free, and everything collapses. Yet, beneath that tension lies resilience, a stubborn humanity that refuses extinction. Stories circulate among defectors. One tells of a woman who traded bicycle parts until she saved enough to buy her son passage across the border. Another of a man who smuggled foreign medicine, curing neighbors while pretending it was local. Each story threads a line between courage and crime. In North Korea, they are the same word pronounced differently depending on who listens. Over time, even the government adapted linguistically. What was once illegal trade became private initiative under state guidance. Semantics covering surrender. They understood that too much repression breeds chaos. Better to manage the black market than to destroy it. So they issued market permits, introduced stalls with assigned numbers, even allowed some forms of advertisement, as long as portraits of the leaders hung above. The illusion of control remains intact, though everyone knows who really governs the flow of goods: hunger, fear, and the silent deal. From an aerial view, the markets form arteries pulsing across the nation. Each provincial city hosts at least one: Hyesan, Hamhung, Wonsan, Pyeongseong. Satellite images show large open spaces with rows of tin roofs, sometimes near train stations or industrial ruins. These are not simply trading zones, they are social networks, places where information, rumor, and hope exchange alongside goods. For a few hours each day, citizens experience a taste of autonomy, the ability to choose, to bargain, to decide. In a land where even thought is regulated, that freedom is revolutionary. Yet every transaction remains under watch. Informants blend into crowds. Cameras capture faces. The State Security Department occasionally makes examples: public arrests, confiscations, executions. The message is clear: you may breathe, but only because we allow it. Fear keeps order where law has failed. Still, cracks widen. Currency reforms in 2009 attempted to suffocate private wealth. Overnight, people's savings turned to dust. Anger flared, and for the first time, citizens cursed openly. The regime learned a dangerous truth: economic control could not be reclaimed by decree. Afterward, they restored partial tolerance, a quiet apology without words. Since then, the markets have expanded beyond anyone's control, the invisible republic beneath the red flag. Today, some traders operate with smartphones, using encrypted Chinese apps to coordinate deliveries. Others bribe officials for travel passes, moving goods from rural areas to city stalls. The border remains porous despite patrols. Smugglers use drones, ropes across rivers, even underground tunnels. Each innovation is met with new restrictions, each restriction with new ingenuity. It is a perpetual duel between survival and authority. For outsiders, these markets reveal an unexpected paradox. The regime's endurance depends on its citizens' defiance. Without them, famine would return, morale would collapse, and loyalty would lose its price. The markets have become a pressure valve, a way to release discontent without explosion. People trade, earn, feed their families, and in doing so, sustain the system that oppresses them. Freedom disguised as necessity. When night falls, the last stalls close. The streets empty except for dogs and distant patrols. Somewhere a vendor counts her earnings under candlelight, a handful of yuan, enough to buy flour tomorrow. She folds the money carefully, hides it beneath a floorboard, then bows briefly toward the portrait on her wall. Not from belief, but habit. Outside, the loudspeaker hums again, announcing another victory of socialism. She listens without listening. The words pass through her like wind through a broken window. Tomorrow, she will return to the market, the secret world that keeps her alive, and by extension keeps her country alive too. Because in North Korea, survival itself is a form of rebellion, and the Jangmadang are its silent revolutionaries. The story of North Korea's secret markets is not one of simple survival. It is the story of an empire quietly cracking from within, of a state that cannot admit its people no longer believe in its promises, yet cannot survive without their disobedience. To understand how these markets became the foundation of the regime's endurance, we have to follow the money, the invisible river that flows beneath the official slogans, nourishing a system built on contradictions. The North Korean economy is, on paper, a masterpiece of central planning. Every grain of rice, every pair of shoes, every drop of fuel is assigned a purpose, a destination, a number in the record books of bureaucrats who have never set foot in a factory. But those books are fiction. The real economy hums below the surface, unrecorded, unacknowledged, unstoppable. Its bankers are the women in the markets. Its stock exchanges are the dirt alleys where yuan changes hands. Its dividends are measured not in ideology, but in calories. The official exchange rate is a lie. Inside the markets, Chinese yuan and US dollars dominate. Prices shift daily, depending on border patrols, harvests, rumors of sanctions, or whispers of executions. Traders memorize rates the way children memorize propaganda songs. 1 yuan might buy a bowl of noodles one day and half a bowl the next. The regime pretends not to notice, but it does, quietly collecting bribes in the same foreign currency it condemns. In Pyeongseong, a man known only as the broker coordinates shipments of goods from China. His phone is Chinese, his SIM card smuggled through the border. He uses it sparingly, aware that signals are monitored. Each call is brief, coded. Apples means rice, clocks means cigarettes, watches means fuel. In the world of the Jangmadang, language itself is camouflage. The broker's network spans traders, drivers, and corrupt border guards. For each successful shipment, he pays every layer of the pyramid. The guard who looks away, the officer who signs a false report, the inspector who stamps it. He operates like a ghost within the machine, a capitalist born of socialism's failure. Every product has a price in blood and silence. Smuggled rice travels by night, hidden in trucks marked for the army. Cigarettes cross rivers, wrapped in waterproof plastic. Medicine arrives concealed within sacks of corn. Along the way, hundreds of small hands make their cut, each one feeding another family. Another illusion of control. By the time a packet of Chinese noodles reaches a stall in Hyesan, its cost has multiplied tenfold, but to the buyer, it's priceless. A taste of the outside world, a reminder that hunger doesn't have to be destiny. The government knows this, it studies it, it exploits it. State-run companies now secretly engage in smuggling themselves, using the same routes they once tried to destroy. Officials invest in traders, share profits, and even use state trucks to move contraband. The line between legal and illegal has blurred so completely that even the enforcers can no longer tell which side they serve. This is how the regime adapts, by absorbing the disease it cannot cure. Inside the capital, a quiet transformation unfolds. Families of high-ranking officials, the so-called donjus or money masters, have built small empires through the markets. They import luxury goods, finance construction projects, and bribe their way into monopolies. They wear imported watches, drive imported cars, and drink imported whiskey. Their children attend elite schools, whispering about future marriages not based on ideology, but on wealth. A new class has emerged, neither loyal nor rebellious, pragmatic, silent, indispensable. They are the bridge between the dictatorship's survival and the people's starvation. The donju live in contradiction. Their wealth depends on the black markets. yet their status depends on the regime. They cannot afford to rebel, yet they no longer truly believe. Their loyalty is transactional, and the regime knows it. Kim Jong-un courts them with privileges while keeping them under surveillance. Their phones are tapped, their homes monitored, their loyalty tested with sudden purges. One wrong word, one careless gesture, and fortune turns to ruin. In North Korea, prosperity is a temporary permission, not a right. In Pyongyang's hidden corners, small boutiques sell foreign fashion, French perfume, Italian shoes, South Korean skincare. None of it exists officially. The goods arrive through a network of diplomats and smugglers, traded for minerals, seafood, or even weapons components. Payment flows through offshore accounts, often in Southeast Asia, where shell companies launder the money. It's a system so complex that even sanctions can't fully penetrate it. The world's most isolated nation has learned to exploit its isolation. Yet for every elite enjoying quiet luxury, thousands still trade for survival. A mother sells noodles cooked over a coal stove, while her son sells cigarettes nearby. They are part of a vast web of self-sufficiency that the state both condemns and depends on. When inspectors arrive, bribes are exchanged. If the inspectors are too zealous, word spreads and the market goes silent. Empty stalls, empty eyes. The next day it reappears in another location. The market is liquid. It flows around obstacles like water seeking a path downhill. And beneath this commerce lies a deeper revolution, the slow birth of awareness. Every trade is an education in hypocrisy. Every foreign good is a whisper that the world outside is richer, freer, brighter. In a country where propaganda declares that North Korea is paradise, the markets are evidence of the lie. A single can of Chinese soda becomes subversion. A USB drive with a South Korean drama becomes enlightenment. When you see people laughing on screen while eating freely, you begin to question why you can't. The authorities know the danger. Periodically, crackdowns sweep through the markets. Radios are confiscated. Traders disappear. Border guards are executed. But the effect is temporary. The markets return stronger, smarter, more invisible. The people learn to hide better, to communicate through coded gestures, to trade under the gaze of cameras without ever being caught. Fear becomes habit, and habit becomes skill. Somewhere near the northern border, a small group of women meet at dawn. They carry bundles wrapped in cloth, cigarettes, medicine, dried fish. They speak softly, avoiding names. One of them is known only as the Auntie. She organizes shipments across the river into China, coordinating with relatives who send back flour and cash. Her business sustains dozens of families, but to the government, she is a criminal. To her neighbors, she is hope. She once told a defector, before he escaped, that the market taught her the truth about power. The party says we are one family, and she said, but in a family, you feed your children. Those words, if spoken publicly, would have condemned her. But within the safety of commerce, even defiance finds a place to breathe. The Jangmadang are more than markets. They are microcosms of the country itself, informal, improvised, resilient. Each stall is a symbol of independence, wrapped in obedience. A woman selling rice bows before the portrait of the leader, not because she believes, but because she must. She knows the police officer watching her has his own stall to protect. Everyone is both victim and accomplice, captive and participant. And yet, through this twisted web, small freedoms bloom. Young people born after the famine, the Jangmadang generation, have never known total dependence on the state. They measure worth not by loyalty, but by ability. They value yuan more than party slogans, and gossip more than propaganda. They are pragmatic, worldly, connected through smuggled media and underground phones. They may never speak of rebellion, but they live it every day through their choices. These young traders dream differently. Some imagine crossing the river, others opening restaurants, buying homes, traveling abroad. They see wealth not as sin, but as skill. Their world is still enclosed, but their minds are beginning to open. In them lies the future, not of revolution by gunfire, but of quiet erosion. A regime built on absolute control is being undone by the very freedom it pretends doesn't exist. There's a paradox at the heart of it all. North Korea's survival depends on the very markets that threaten its ideology. Without them, millions would starve. With them, millions learn independence. Kim Jong-un's government treads this razor's edge daily, cracking down just enough to maintain fear, allowing just enough to prevent collapse. It's a dance of shadows, where each step risks disaster. Foreign observers often ask, how does this system endure? The answer lies in balance. The regime understands that control doesn't require belief, only fear and dependence. The markets provide both. They feed the people just enough to keep them alive, and the fear of losing that fragile lifeline keeps them compliant. It's a psychological trap as elegant as it is cruel. But beneath that fear, something irreversible stirs. Knowledge, once seen, cannot be unseen. Trade, once learned, cannot be forgotten. The Jangmadang generation will one day inherit a country still wrapped in propaganda, but they will know, deep down, that the world beyond the loudspeakers is different. That realization is a slow fuse, burning quietly under the surface. For now, life continues in cycles of control and adaptation. Traders hide money in the ground, wrapped in plastic, safe from inflation. Children help count yuan, learning arithmetic not from school books but from survival. Officials visit stores to collect fees, and traders pay them with practiced smiles. It's a rhythm that has become the nation's true economy, unrecorded, unstoppable. Even religion finds its way into this hidden commerce. Some underground Christians trade secretly within the markets, exchanging food for safety, Bibles for silence. Faith travels disguised as goods, prayers whispered between transactions. For them, the market is not just survival, it's sanctuary. Occasionally, someone disappears. A trader caught with contraband, a smuggler betrayed, a customer who spoke too freely. Their absence sends ripples through the market, a warning, a whisper. The next day, life resumes as if nothing happened. In North Korea, memory itself is a form of risk. The living survive by forgetting, and yet, despite fear, the markets grow. Satellite images confirm new roofs, new stores, new expansions. What began as defiance in the famine years has evolved into an institution as essential as the party itself. The government cannot close it. The people cannot abandon it. Together they maintain the lie that it doesn't exist, because acknowledging it would mean admitting that socialism has failed. In Pyeongseong, an elderly man sums it up with bitter clarity. The state feeds our mouths with words, he says, but the market feeds them with food. That sentence, if heard by the wrong ears, could end his life, but he says it anyway, softly. Because truth in North Korea must be spoken like a secret. At sunset, the market glows with dim lanterns. People move through narrow aisles, faces half hidden, voices hushed. Somewhere, a child laughs as his mother haggles for noodles. Somewhere else, a soldier pockets a bribe. The air smells of sweat and smoke. For a moment, it feels almost ordinary, a fragment of normal life in an abnormal world. But beneath that normalcy lies a quiet rebellion, not of slogans or protests, but of persistence. The markets endure, and through them, the people endure. Every trade, every whisper, every bribe is a small act of defiance that sustains both the oppressor and the oppressed. It is the paradox of survival under tyranny, that the will to live becomes the most subversive force of all. In the end, the Jangmadang are not just markets, they are mirrors, reflecting both the failure of the regime and the unbreakable ingenuity of its people. They are proof that even in a nation built on control, life finds a way to negotiate its freedom, one transaction at a time. And in those exchanges, silent, dangerous, forbidden, you can hear the heartbeat of a nation that refuses to die. It begins with silence, the kind that settles not from peace, but from exhaustion. In the rural provinces of North Korea, far from the parade boulevards of Pyongyang, the markets are not just a secret economy. They are a question of life or death. There, hunger is not a metaphor. It is a daily visitor, sitting at every table where there is no food. It is what pushes mothers into the cold to sell, to trade, to risk everything. It is what teaches people that ideology does not cook rice. In a village near Hamhung, the sun rises over roofs patched with metal sheets. Smoke climbs from chimneys made of concrete and mud. Children walk barefoot, their faces grey from coal dust. And as the morning begins, People drift toward an empty lot near the train station, the site of the local jangmadang. Wooden stalls appear like ghosts from the earth, built and dismantled each day. Women spread their blankets on the ground, setting up the meager remains of their livelihoods. Onions, second-hand shoes, homemade tofu, bits of seaweed. It looks fragile, almost pathetic. Yet this is the engine that keeps the country alive. The government calls it chaos. The people call it survival. The soldiers passing by see it for what it is, the difference between obedience and starvation. For many, especially the older generation who lived through the arduous march of the 1990s, the trauma never faded. They remember the years when the food rations stopped, when the radio continued to praise the marshal, while entire families vanished into the soil. Out of that suffering, a new instinct was born, to depend on oneself, no matter what the slogans said. There is a story, whispered among defectors, of a mother named Sukja. She had 2 children and a husband who worked in a factory that no longer produced anything but reports of loyalty. Each day he went to work, pretending while she walked miles to trade scraps of corn for rice. She learned to hide food under floorboards, to bribe inspectors, to fake smiles during neighborhood meetings. When her husband died of malnutrition, she wrapped his body in a blanket and buried him behind the factory. She told her children he had gone to work. Then she went back to the market. Her story is not exceptional. It is ordinary. That is the horror, that desperation became normal and normalcy became survival. The jangmadang women, once dismissed as troublemakers, became the silent backbone of the nation. They built their networks, bartered favors, memorized faces. They became economists without education, traders without permission, capitalists without ideology. And in their resilience, the seeds of quiet rebellion took root. The market is dangerous, but hunger is worse. A kilogram of rice can cost a week's wage. To afford it, families sell anything: clothing, furniture, even parts of their homes. Smuggling routes across the Chinese border promise profit, but demand peril. Many have drowned crossing the Yalu River, shot by guards, or dragged away to camps. Yet new traders always emerge, driven by necessity stronger than fear. The camps loom large in every whisper. They are the black holes of North Korean society, places where names vanish and memory is forbidden. A trader caught selling forbidden goods or dealing with a foreigner may disappear into one of them. Those who return, if they ever do, are shadows of themselves. They tell of forced labor, beatings, starvation, executions. In some camps, prisoners dig coal for the very industries that fuel the regime's luxury. In others, they are used as examples, their suffering broadcast to remind the rest of the nation what defiance costs. And yet, the people keep trading, because in North Korea, there is no choice between risk and safety, only between death slowly and death fast. In the capital, the contrast is surreal. Pyongyang's streets are swept clean, its buildings freshly painted for foreign eyes, the elite shop in government-run stores stocked with imported goods. But even here, the jangmadang pulse underneath the asphalt. Behind apartment blocks, private kitchens sell homemade food to those who can pay. On certain nights, traders gather in the shadows of monuments, exchanging dollars and yuan for rice or fuel. The same system that claims to have abolished class now sustains it. A young woman named Mi Yon once sold cigarettes at one of these hidden corners. Her father was a loyal party member, but loyalty did not feed them. She found a smuggler willing to supply her with cheap tobacco from China. She bribed a policeman to look the other way. In time, she became rich, by North Korean standards. She bought a bicycle, new shoes, even a small radio. But one day, the policeman who protected her was arrested. The next day, she was gone. The other traders whispered that she was sent to a re-education camp. Her stall was replaced within hours. The market mourned her the only way it could, by continuing. Fear is the air people breathe, but it has become so constant that they no longer taste it. Children grow up learning not what is forbidden, but how to hide what is forbidden. They speak in code, pretend to study loyalty, and dream of other lives seen in flickering images smuggled on USB drives. Those drives, often disguised as music collections, contain South Korean dramas, foreign films, even documentaries about their own country. The irony is brutal. North Koreans learning about their reality from foreign media that risk their lives to possess. When night falls, some families gather around hidden screens, curtains drawn, volume low. They watch stories of freedom, of love without permission, of cities lit by neon instead of propaganda. They see people laughing, eating, traveling, and for a moment, the walls of their world widen. Then the fear returns. A knock at the door could mean death. A neighbor's curiosity could destroy everything. But they still watch, because hope is an addiction. In the markets, hope is traded as quietly as rice. A man sells batteries that can power forbidden radios. A woman sells notebooks made from stolen factory paper. Another sells medicine she claims can cure anything: hunger, cold, despair. Each transaction carries a weight of risk, but also of meaning. To trade is to live is to resist. Yet survival comes with guilt. Those who profit from the markets often carry a silent shame, the knowledge that their fortune depends on the suffering of others. Traders who become wealthy must bribe more, deceive more, trust less. Their children attend secret schools paid for with money that could feed dozens. The more they climb, the closer they come to the regime they once defied. And so the circle continues. Survival breeds corruption. Corruption feeds control. Control sustains the illusion. There are unspoken rules that everyone knows. Never speak of politics in the market. Never show curiosity about the outside world. Never trust too easily. Every conversation could be overheard. Every friend could be an informer. Even family members watch one another, because love in North Korea is not stronger than fear. Parents teach children loyalty, not because they believe, but because they want them to live. A defector once said, "The market gave me the courage to escape because it taught me that not everything the government says is true." That realization, simple, dangerous, begins with money. When you learn that the value of rice changes not by decree but by supply and demand, you begin to see that power, too, might not be divine. That understanding spreads slowly, like water seeping through cracks in a dam. The state can patch the holes, but the pressure never stops building. The regime's answer has been to adapt. It now licenses certain traders, issues permits, collects fees. It pretends that markets are state-guided cooperatives, but beneath the paperwork lies chaos. Officials extort money from traders, demanding loyalty payments. Those who refuse risk losing everything. In effect, the government has monetized its own failure. It sells permission to survive. And so a new form of loyalty emerges, one bought in cash. When you pay your bribe, you're not buying freedom. You're renting it day by day. The system thrives because everyone is complicit. The trader pays the bribe, the officer takes it, the supervisor above pretends not to see. Together, they form a triangle of corruption that keeps both order and despair intact. At the base of that triangle are the women. They wake before dawn, cook for their families, then spend the day at the market. They endure cold, harassment, suspicion. They know that a wrong price or a wrong word could cost them their stall or their life. Yet they continue. These women are the quiet heroes of North Korea, though the world will never know their names. In one recorded testimony, a defector described watching her mother trade under pouring rain, her hands shaking from cold. "She never stopped," the daughter said. "Even when the soldiers came, she smiled. She said if she stopped smiling, they would take everything." That smile, hollow, trembling, is the real face of the North Korean economy. At night, when the markets close, the women walk home through dark streets. Electricity is rationed, so the city glows faintly from the moonlight reflecting off the river. In their homes, they count their earnings, stacks of foreign bills hidden under blankets, buried under floors. They know the money means safety, food, maybe medicine. But they also know it could vanish overnight if the government changes the currency again. They live between gratitude and dread, sustained by a hope they don't dare name. And still the market expands. New goods appear: solar panels, USB drives, imported cosmetics. Each item represents a breach in isolation. Every transaction a small victory over the state's attempt to define reality. The black market has become the people's republic within the republic, an invisible nation where truth, however fragile, still circulates. But survival in North Korea demands something more than courage. It demands the ability to forget what freedom looks like. For those who remain, dreaming too vividly is dangerous. To see the world clearly is to suffer. So they learn to balance, to trade without questioning too deeply, to survive without remembering too much. That is the cruelest skill of all. Yet no dictatorship can erase the hunger to live better. The Jangmadang are proof of that, living monuments to human adaptability. They exist in the space between terror and necessity, between obedience and defiance. Each one is a small miracle of endurance built atop the ruins of a failed ideology. And through them, the people of North Korea tell their truth, not with words, but with survival. Because in the end, survival here is not passive. It is an act of defiance, a rebellion waged in whispers and transactions, under the eyes of those who believe they control everything. The state built its power on silence, but the markets taught the people how to speak, not aloud but with action. And one day those actions may echo louder than the loudspeakers ever could. For now, the night belongs to the traders. The sound of coins, the shuffle of goods, the quiet laughter of those who have endured another day. They move through darkness like ghosts who refuse to vanish. Their existence is the regime's greatest secret and its greatest threat. From the outside, North Korea appears still, a static photograph of control frozen in time. But within its borders, something moves beneath the silence. A hidden circulation of power, profit, and survival threads through its mountains and alleys. It is the pulse of an invisible nation within a nation, a country that functions despite the one that rules. And if you know where to look, you can see it flickering behind the illusion of order, in the coded language of traders, in the flow of smuggled money, in the whispered networks of those who risk everything for a taste of autonomy. The Jangmadang are no longer mere markets. They have become arteries feeding the entire system, branching into every level of life, from the poorest villages to the highest echelons of privilege. Even the elite who condemn them by day depend on them by night. The deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. The black market is the true state, and the official one is its mask. In the northern provinces near the Yalu River, the border glows faintly at night from the lights of Chinese towns across the water. On one side, neon. On the other, darkness. Between them, a fragile lifeline, the smugglers who cross unseen. They carry rice, cigarettes, sugar, fuel, medicine, phones, USB drives. The cargo changes, but the motive never does. Hunger is the compass. Profit is the map. Smuggling is an industry. Entire families depend on it. A woman in Hisan might act as a coordinator, using an illegal Chinese phone to arrange deliveries. Her husband, a former soldier, knows the patrol schedules. A cousin in China buys goods and sends them through the river at night, packed in floating barrels tied to ropes. On the North Korean side, boys pull the barrels ashore and stash them in caves before dawn. Later, couriers disguised as farmers carry the goods to the markets. At each stage, hands are greased, debts are paid, silences are bought. Sometimes the chain breaks. A patrol stumbles upon the smuggling route. Shots are fired. The barrels vanish into the current. Someone is arrested, someone disappears. But the trade never stops. It adapts, shifts, mutates. For every smuggler caught, 2 more emerge. The market is a living organism, wounded, resilient, learning. Across the country, secret warehouses have sprung up, known only to trusted insiders. Inside them, shelves of Chinese electronics, South Korean cosmetics, American painkillers, even foreign whiskey. The goods are distributed through coded deliveries disguised as state shipments. Some go to the Jangmadang, others directly to Pyongyang's shadow luxury circles, those who can afford to indulge their defiance. At the center of this underground web are the Donju, the money masters. They are the new aristocracy of North Korea, the byproduct of a contradiction the regime can no longer hide. Once, loyalty to the party determined power. Now, it is liquidity. The Donju fund construction projects, bribe officials, import goods, and finance smuggling routes. Some even lend money to state enterprises, collecting repayment in kind, a reversal so complete that even the party cannot deny it. A Donju man in Pyeongseong might own trucks registered under a fake state company. His warehouses are protected by the same soldiers who are supposed to arrest him. He lives in an apartment filled with imported furniture, his children dressed in South Korean fashion. He attends party meetings, clapping at the right times, smiling in the right places. But his true loyalty belongs to profit. He is not a revolutionary. He is a survivor of ideology's collapse, and he wears the mask of devotion to keep his freedom. Through men like him, the market reaches into the government itself. Ministries rely on private funds to meet quotas. Local officials tax the black markets in exchange for turning a blind eye. Policemen who once confiscated goods now rent out stall space. The border guards, once feared for their cruelty, now depend on traders for bribes to feed their own families. Every act of control has become a negotiation. Every rule has a price. This unspoken arrangement sustains the illusion of order. The government condemns corruption in public, then exploits it in private. It cannot eradicate the markets without destroying itself, and so it feeds on them like a parasite feeding on its host, draining yet preserving. The result is a fragile equilibrium that no one dares to disturb. But within this equilibrium lies something more profound, the slow erosion of fear. When people learn that rules can be bent, that authority can be bribed, that survival is a matter of strategy rather than loyalty, the foundations of absolute control begin to crack. The market teaches not only trade, it teaches agency. It shows that power is not divine but transactional. Even information now travels through these secret channels. USB drives smuggled from China carry more than entertainment. They carry forbidden truth. South Korean dramas, Western documentaries, foreign news broadcasts, each file a grenade against propaganda. People watch them in secret, behind locked doors, the curtains drawn. For many, it is their first glimpse of a world where lights stay on after dark, where people speak freely, where laughter isn't rehearsed. A defector once recalled the first time she saw a South Korean commercial for fried chicken. It wasn't the food, she said. It was the people. They looked happy. They laughed like they had never been afraid. That single image, a laugh, became her first seed of doubt. For those raised on slogans and ration cards, joy itself is contraband. The government's response is both brutal and absurd. Propaganda campaigns accuse foreign media of poisoning the soul. New laws promise execution for anyone caught distributing South Korean content. Yet even as police raid homes, the smuggled drives keep arriving. Some are hidden in sacks of rice, others inside toys or shoes. Each time one is destroyed, another takes its place. Truth once imported cannot be unlearned. Inside Pyongyang, the elites are not immune to this infection. Despite their privileges, many secretly consume the same forbidden content. They do so cautiously, knowing that even they are not untouchable. But they too are curious. They too compare. The market has reached them not just through goods, but through imagination. The party tries to keep up appearances. It organizes mass rallies, orchestrates new loyalty oaths, and installs new surveillance systems. But behind the spectacle, the system depends on the very forces it condemns. When sanctions tighten, it quietly expands trade through the markets. When food shortages hit, it lets smuggling flourish. The same state that condemns capitalism survives because of it. This duality defines everything in North Korea. The coexistence of faith and fraud, devotion and deception. A trader bows before the portrait of Kim Il-sung while hiding Chinese cash in her pocket. A soldier swears allegiance to the supreme leader while guarding a truckload of smuggled goods. A party secretary gives a speech on self-reliance, then buys contraband cigarettes from his driver. The country survives by pretending these contradictions don't exist. But the markets remember. They are repositories of memory, of famine, fear, and defiance. The women who built them remember burying their families during the hunger years. The men who trade in them remember the first time they bribed a guard. Their children grow up watching both the system and the cracks in it. For them, loyalty is performance, not belief. And yet, even as the market liberates, it also traps. Because every profit depends on silence, every freedom on complicity. Traders cannot expose corruption without destroying themselves. They thrive in the shadows, and those shadows keep the regime alive. The market does not overthrow power, It feeds it, sustains it, balances it. North Korea has perfected a new kind of control, a dictatorship that thrives on the self-interest of its subjects. But what happens when that self-interest begins to demand more? When the traders grow bolder? When the flow of goods turns into the flow of ideas? The regime watches carefully. It knows that the most dangerous revolutions begin not with guns, but with comparisons. A country that sees too much begins to ask why. Already small acts of defiance ripple through the borderlands. Some traders now bribe officials not just for protection, but for information, on patrol schedules, policy changes, even exchange rates. Knowledge becomes currency. A few have begun to question the unspoken deal. Why must they pay so much? Why must they hide what keeps everyone alive? It is not yet rebellion. It is something quieter, more dangerous. Disillusionment. In Hisan, a rumor spreads that one trader refused to pay a bribe and still walked free. It might be false, but it spreads like wildfire. Rumors in North Korea are a kind of hope. They suggest that rules are not absolute, that courage or luck or something unseen can break the pattern. And once people begin to believe that, fear begins to lose its teeth. The regime senses this. Surveillance intensifies. New neighborhood watch committees form. Loudspeakers remind citizens that the eyes of the party are everywhere. But the eyes are tired, the watchers hungry. Bribes blur vigilance, and fear grows thin. The louder the state shouts, the quieter its authority becomes. Beyond the border, the outside world watches, analysts, journalists, governments, all searching for signs of collapse. But they misunderstand the nature of North Korea's endurance. It does not survive because it is strong, but because its people have learned to live within its contradictions. The market has taught them how to bend without breaking, to obey without believing, to survive without surrendering. Still, cracks multiply. A single smuggled phone call to China can reveal more truth than a lifetime of propaganda. A memory card can ignite a conversation. A trade gone wrong can expose an official's hypocrisy. The markets may not spark a revolution in the streets, but they are changing the country from the inside out, teaching millions that the world is larger than the state, and that survival can coexist with quiet defiance. One night near the border, a trader kneels by the river, whispering into a phone. Her contact in China confirms the next shipment. She hesitates, looking at the reflection of the foreign lights across the water. They shimmer like stars she cannot touch. For a moment she imagines crossing, stepping into a place where no one watches, where no one bows. Then she folds the phone away, stands and walks back into the darkness. She has work to do, she has mouths to feed. Hope must wait for another night. And yet, the light remains. It reflects on the river's surface, faint but unyielding, like the truth itself, impossible to drown. Dawn comes quietly to the markets of North Korea. The mist rolls through narrow streets lined with peeling paint and propaganda banners fluttering weakly in the cold air. Loudspeakers still echo the morning hymns to the supreme leader, their metallic voices claiming abundance, devotion, unity. But as the sound fades, another rhythm takes its place. The low murmur of trade, the shuffle of feet, the clink of coins. It is the same ritual repeated across the country, from the dusty outskirts of Hyesan to the silent lanes of Hamhung. The sound of survival. The Jangmadang wake before the sun. Women sweep the ground with straw brooms, setting up stalls of old wood and plastic sheets. Children chase each other through puddles. Men push carts loaded with rice or dried fish. Everything smells faintly of coal, sweat, and determination. To outsiders, these scenes might seem mundane, but in North Korea, each act of commerce is a quiet defiance. Each transaction is a sentence whispered against the silence imposed by the state. It's strange. A regime built on control has created the conditions for its own undoing. For decades, it promised self-reliance, an economy of ideological purity. But hunger exposed the lie, and necessity birthed something more resilient than fear, adaptation. The Jangmadang are not simply black markets. They are the physical manifestation of truth, that people cannot be commanded to starve, that even under the most totalitarian rule, the instinct to live will find a way. Imagine a woman standing behind her stall, hands rough from years of cold. She's selling rice, maybe onions, maybe small bags of sugar she bought from a friend who smuggled them across the border. She doesn't think of herself as brave. She doesn't imagine she's part of history. She only knows that each sale might mean another meal for her children. Yet in that moment, without speeches or banners, she is rewriting the story of her country. She is proving that power does not come from ideology or guns, but from the will to endure. In the 1990s, when the famine raged and the state collapsed inward under its own weight, the Jangmadang appeared like wildflowers breaking through concrete. The government called them criminal, but the people saw them as salvation. Women who once relied on state rations became traders, smugglers, negotiators. Men once loyal to factories that no longer produced anything became transporters, guards, lookouts. The collapse forced innovation. It taught the people a cruel but vital truth. If you wait for the state to save you, you die. That lesson never faded. It passed silently from mother to daughter, from neighbor to neighbor. It became part of the nation's bloodstream. Today, even as Pyongyang projects strength to the world, parades, missiles, polished speeches, beneath it all, the same truth hums in the background. The country survives not because of the system, but in spite of it. The irony is almost biblical. The very forces that could one day dismantle the regime are the ones keeping it alive today. Without the markets, there would be famine again. Without smuggling, the elite would lose their luxuries, the army its rations, the party its illusion of stability. So the government tolerates what it cannot control, punishes what it cannot destroy, and depends on what it cannot admit exists. North Korea has become a paradox sustained by its own denial. And yet beyond this paradox, something deeper stirs, something human, something the regime cannot reach. It is not rebellion in the traditional sense. There are no protests, no chants, no banners. There is only awareness. The markets are teaching people to think differently, to measure value not by loyalty but by effort, not by ideology but by exchange. They are teaching the fundamentals of freedom, not as a political concept, but as an instinct. Freedom here begins not with words, but with small dangerous choices. A woman who chooses to trade instead of waiting for rations. A man who hides a foreign bill instead of handing it over to the authorities. A child who watches a forbidden film and realizes that laughter can sound genuine. These moments, scattered and silent, are the foundations of transformation. They are the quiet rebellion of the ordinary. The regime fears that silence more than any protest. It cannot be arrested, cannot be executed, cannot be televised. It grows in kitchens, in markets, in whispers carried by the wind. It is the same force that has toppled empires throughout history, the slow awakening of a population that no longer believes. But belief dies slowly in North Korea. Decades of indoctrination do not vanish overnight. The portrait of the leaders still hangs in every home. The songs still echo from the speakers. The slogans still cover the walls. Outwardly, nothing changes. People still bow, still recite, still smile when told to smile. But beneath that surface, faith has rotted. The rituals have become theater. The words are hollow sounds uttered for survival, not conviction. A defector once said, "In North Korea, we all acted in a play we could never leave." The markets are the first cracks in that stage. They remind people that there is life beyond the script, that food can come from effort, not decree, that money can replace slogans, that truth can hide inside a tin of Chinese soda or a flash drive filled with laughter. Each generation learns faster than the last. The children of the Jangmadang, born after the famine, raised amid trade, are more pragmatic, less fearful. They see the state not as a god, but as an obstacle to navigate. They know how to negotiate, how to lie when necessary, how to bribe discreetly. They know that power is not sacred. For them, loyalty is a costume they wear, not a faith they hold. This new generation does not dream of revolution. They dream of travel, of good food, of music, of light. But those dreams are seeds. They cannot flourish under dictatorship forever. Sooner or later, the dissonance between what they see and what they are told will demand resolution. And when that moment comes, whether years or decades from now, it will not be a sudden explosion. It will be a quiet unraveling, an awakening already long in progress. Even now there are signs. Traders use encrypted Chinese apps to communicate. Smugglers organize cross-border deals with astonishing precision. The yuan has replaced the won in much of daily life. Currency, not ideology, determines reality. It's an invisible revolution, one that changes the structure of loyalty itself. People who depend on markets learn to trust transactions, not speeches. They depend on relationships, not propaganda. The government's control weakens not because people defy it openly, but because they no longer need it. Still, the regime endures. Its resilience lies in adaptation, in its ability to exploit even the forces that oppose it. Every time the markets grow too powerful, the state rebrands them, absorbs them, taxes them. It turns survival into obedience, independence into cooperation. It is an endless cycle. The people find freedom, the state monetizes it. And yet, with each cycle, a little more truth slips through. That truth is not shouted, it is felt. In every stall where foreign goods are sold, in every whispered deal, in every stolen moment of laughter over smuggled videos, it is the truth that the world beyond the border exists, that it is real, that it can be reached. For now, that knowledge lives only in the imagination. But imagination is a dangerous thing in a place built on fear. Because fear depends on ignorance, and ignorance, once broken, never repairs. In one northern town, a trader sits in her home, the light from a single candle flickering across the portrait of Kim Il-sung on her wall. She looks at it for a long time, not with reverence, but with exhaustion. She thinks of the years she spent selling rice, bribing police, hiding money, burying hope. She remembers her husband's arrest, her daughter's hunger, her son's escape across the river. She has learned that survival is both a gift and a wound, that to live in North Korea is to become a master of pretending. Outside, she hears the sound of soldiers marching in the distance, their boots hitting the ground in perfect rhythm. She wonders what they are told to believe. She wonders if they too have mothers trading in the markets, sisters smuggling goods, fathers bribing guards. She wonders if they know that the country they defend no longer exists, that it has been replaced by something smaller, but more real. The network of lives intertwined by necessity. In another city, a young man watches a South Korean drama on his phone, the volume barely audible. He sees a scene of a family eating dinner together, bright lights, full plates, laughter. He pauses the video and stares at the screen. It feels unreal, like a dream too vivid to be believed, but something in him stirs, not envy, not anger, just awareness. He knows now that there is another way to live. That knowledge is enough to change him forever. The Jangmadang are not merely physical spaces. They are psychological frontiers. The boundary between the world as the regime defines it and the world as people discover it truly is. Each transaction, each smuggled image, each whispered secret pushes that boundary a little further outward. The borders of belief are expanding even if the borders of geography remain closed. The world rarely sees this transformation because it happens quietly, beneath the surface of fear. But one day historians will look back and see that the revolution began not in the palaces of Pyongyang, nor in the offices of foreign diplomats, but in the dirt markets of starving towns, among the women who refused to die quietly. The Jangmadang generation will be remembered not for shouting but for surviving. And when the last loudspeaker falls silent, when the portraits come down, when the rivers run freely without guards, it will be those markets that historians trace as the roots of change, not as symbols of rebellion, but as monuments to the endurance of the human spirit, a testament that even under the weight of the most complete control, people will always find a way to trade, to hope, to live. Because survival is not just a form of resistance, it is the beginning of freedom. The sun climbs higher now, the markets swell with noise, footsteps, laughter, bargaining. A woman sells rice, a man repairs a bicycle, children run through aisles lined with sacks of grain. It looks ordinary. It is extraordinary. Every face carries a story of endurance, every gesture an act of quiet defiance. The state believes it owns these people. But here in this chaos, in this fragile economy of survival, the people own themselves, if only for a moment. And perhaps that is enough, for now, because revolutions do not always begin with gunfire. Sometimes they begin with trade, with a whisper. With the sound of coins passing from one trembling hand to another in a marketplace, the government pretends does not exist. And in those small exchanges, beneath the watchful eyes of portraits and soldiers, lies the greatest secret of all, that life, even under tyranny, will always find a way to bloom.